Congressman André Carson joins us from Washington, D.C. today. So, Congressman, thanks for your time. Should Americans be concerned about these flying objects over the United States?
Well, I think most Americans have been concerned. I think that they should be less concerned with what is in the debris. I think that's up to the intelligence community, and I trust the community in this regard. But honestly, I've been sounding the alarm on this issue since I chaired the first open hearing on UAPs in 50 years, since Project Blue Book. And after the open hearing, we experienced an increase in reported sightings, which shows a reduced stigma that allowed more pilots to say something when they saw something. In fact, when we conducted the hearing, a lot of my colleagues snickered, but they showed up to the hearings. They had questions. Even my colleagues on the Senate side were saying, hey, we wanted to do this, but we were afraid of the repercussions of being mocked, of being ridiculed. And so a big part of the effort was to reduce the stigma so folks can talk about it. There was an unclassified report released last month as a result of that hearing. And the main takeaway was that we have to continue studying and investigating these sightings. I've been in almost 3 classified briefings today. There will be more, but I think the American people should be reassured that we have superior capabilities as it relates to monitoring these kinds of objects in our airspace.
Chinese spy balloon, and what have you learned about these 3 other objects that were shot down by U.S. fighter jets?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's still unfolding out of school, but in a lot of cases, objects that have been spotted were balloons. They did not alert any of our sensors, so they did not give off a heat signature as such. But there's still a lot that we don't know. We don't know whether these objects were completely benign, if they had something to do with an adversary, if they were a state actor, a non-state actor, if they came from the private sector. But at the very least, these objects were really essentially a safety concern for pilots. But, I'm confident that the president did the right thing, and the Department of Defense and my colleagues were going to continue looking for answers. We were in a briefing earlier with the Intelligence Committee and generals from the Department of Defense, as well as the administration and the intelligence community. There have been several briefings today. So I'm confident that the American people will be given satisfactory answers up until this point.
What have you learned about these 3 in particular that were shot down?
Well, China made an accusation against our country saying that we've flown objects over their airspace. And the White House has said on record that this is, simply false. And honestly, an effort to deflect from China's own irresponsible violations of our sovereignty and that of at least 40 other nations. I'm honored to serve on both the China Committee and the Intelligence Committee. And, there's a lot of work that we're going to do, but this is still unfolding. And I've been saying, as now the ranking member over the CIA subcommittee, that we have to be very careful about how we talk about these things in public spaces, because our adversaries are listening, and they're listening for cues that will give them deeper insights into our methodology, into our stratagem, into how things are working.
Congressman, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said that the first U.S. missile that fired at the unidentified object over Lake Huron missed the second target and landed harmlessly in the water, but the second one then was able to successfully hit that target. What do you say to Americans who are concerned about the risks of trying to shoot down an object over U.S. airspace?
Well, I think it's always a concern, and so we leave it up to our expertise to look at trajectory and where debris will fall, and if it's in an open space, whether the tundra or the Upper Peninsula in Michigan or other places, the issue of UAPs will continue to come up. We can't make rash judgments until we have all of the information. And I think we will be able to continue working together in a bipartisan way to properly analyze this issue.
And the terrain, I'm glad you brought that up, because the terrain is going to be difficult, because it's our understanding that the one off the coast of Alaska is in a difficult spot, the one in the Yukon Peninsula is in a difficult spot, and the other one in Lake Huron is, maybe 200-300 feet down in water. So are you confident that we will eventually get answers about what these objects were once we are able to reach the debris, or do you think we may never know?
I think in many ways we will get answers. In other ways, we'll never satisfy the curiosity of a lot of people or the suspicions of a lot of people. I've shared those suspicions, quite frankly, which is why we held the first open hearing in 50 years since Project Blue Book, to get answers. And the Pentagon, Mr. Moultrie and others were generous enough to come to my hearing as well as share footage. And so this is an issue that we're going to monitor continually. We can't rule out China, but we also can't rule out non-state actors in regards to this, or even the private sector.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about the economy. Inflation is still above 6%. Do you feel the Fed's actions are working?
I think so. There are a lot of people who want to put a cap on the debt limit. Economists have told us repeatedly, this is a bad idea. I'm not an economist, but my time on the financial services gave me deeper insights. There was legislation to automatically increase the debt ceiling every year. Economists said this wasn't a bad idea. My hope is that my colleagues who either have presidential ambitions or who have other political ambitions will not use this as a political tool to mislead and misinform the American people. Something needs to happen. We're still reeling from our economic downturn. We're still reeling from COVID. And so in a very real sense, we have to look at ways in which we can spur economic growth. The Indianapolis housing market is slowly recovering. I just saw an article today. Those are positive indicators that we're on the right track.
What more needs to be done to tamp down on inflation?
Well, I think that obviously we have to rein in excessive governmental spending in many regards. These reports on China do not help as we look at ways in which to curtail military spending. There are bigger discussions about how do we encourage Americans to spend? We saw the auto industry where even the used car sector, prices had risen significantly. We're seeing car prices slowly go down. We're slowly seeing the housing market get better. It was horrendous for like 2 years. But also we need to make sure that we are incenting companies, Hoosier companies, American companies, to make investments in local communities, hire Americans, hire Hoosiers, hire women and minority businesses as it relates to governmental contracting, as well as create legislation that does not thwart or slow down entrepreneurial creativity and ingenuity. We have it, but we have to make sure we're holding legislators accountable, city, state, and federal, like myself, to do the right thing as it relates to empowering small businesses.
Congressman André Carson in Washington, always great to talk to you. Thanks for your time today.
What an honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.